Hello and welcome to the channel. Today I will be going over and talking about how Tau sit as a faction in the whole of 40k 10th edition as of current. To start out, the past 5 to 6 weeks we're sitting at about a 43% win rate. This is with the most recent tournaments and going a couple weeks back. We're sitting currently at the second lowest. We're tied with Black Templars, sitting right above Agents, which have such a low player count it's hard to even include, but they still have a lower win rate. Now, this is below GW's goal of where they want factions to sit, which is about 45%, which doesn't look like we're down that much, but we are currently quite far down in comparison to other factions. And from what I've noticed, we've been sitting most of this edition, from as much as I can recall, we've been sitting in the mid to low tier for quite often. Now with us just dropping down way lower than where we should be. From what I've noticed from most of my games, for some background, I'm a casual player, but I have played at a couple local tournaments and always done quite well. But it's almost always feels like it's an uphill battle for Tau, always having to exert all of my brain power into making the decisions that need to happen for the army, how to move, how to stage the units, how to guide the units, having what guide. All of our power comes from guiding. Guiding as a mechanic, it requires us we start at mediocre shooting, if not like a very average shooting, starting at 4s, and to hit like any of the other shooting factions, we need to be guided. So we have to stick out our necks of our weaker units that should be doing objectives and screening to simply guide, which can be a hassle on its own, just to be able to hit the same as other units. Some other things I've noticed is most people, including myself, would like the points of Tau to go up. Obviously not just increase the points of Tau, but to increase the points of Tau and the Tau be better. So Tau are more of an elite-based army in the field, not just our points are so cheap so we have a gazillion crisis suits on the field that are doing nothing. There's multiple ways that this could be represented. That I'll talk about a little bit later on as well. Like, crisis suits could go up from T5 to T6 to match other units on the field. There's other units in other armies that are smaller, not as capable, and they're a lot tougher than Tau. They're a whole toughness tougher than that's a tongue twister. They're tougher than our crisis suits, which are one of our most important units, especially in lore. What Tau have? So before I get into the negatives, as a lot of people recently I've noticed have been very negative on it, and it's hard not to be negative whenever you're seeing everywhere looking at stats how we're the lowest army in competitive scenes, and especially since the army has a higher scaling of difficulty because of all the hoops you have to go through versus rather just running yourself up the field and hitting the person on the objective or hitting the person closest to you. I won't go over the positives too much, but I will go over a few things that make us stand out in some of our highlights. We have good movement for our battle suits, and they have fly characteristic, like for the Riptide, for example. Ghost Keel, crisis suits, we all have pretty fast movement, moving 10 inches, which is really good, and having fly, being able to move over enemy units, not necessarily getting screened out of moving where we need to get to it on an objective, which is very useful. And then we have cheap units, which is a positive and a negative. It's a positive in the fact that it's what's allowing us to compete right now. If Riptides were a lot more expensive, like before the Codex release, the Codex had them marked at, I believe, 280, and then they went down to 180. I think we're sitting at 190 or 180 now, and that's still fairly cheap for what it does. It just could do it better, obviously, for more points. That's what a lot of people want. But our cheap units are what are holding us together right now. So if Tau got put into a more elite feel like people want, I think there need to be a point representation, and our points would need to increase. Something else that we do good is the good thing about our guiding mechanic. Something that I would say is a good part of the guiding mechanic, not including the increasing the ballistic skill and making our shooting better to hit, but in the fact that it ignores cover. I think that is a really cool and a makes sense mechanic idea for guiding. I think guiding giving ignores cover makes sense. Our shooting being worse than everybody else and relying on guiding to hit like normal and everybody else, I do not think is a good mechanic. Continuing on, I'm gonna go over what Tau lack. Now, there's quite a few stuff on this list right here, and obviously, this is a video highlighting negatives in the state of Tau right now. Tau is obviously still a playable faction. They're able to win. It just seems like it takes harder work right now for the average player and for competitive players. Some of the things that we lack that can be difficult for us is our lack of CP generation. For command points, some of the units we have are Shadow Sun, Farsight, and Ethereals. The Ethereals giving us potentially 1 command point in our command phase on a 4-up, which is a useful ability, but is a swing or a miss. It's 50 points to either give a strike team a Feel No Pain or a Breacher a Feel No Pain, which in comparison to a Cadre Fireblade usually isn't worth it. Unless with a strike team, which is where it's typically ran, or just an ethereal by itself sitting on your home objective to get points, potentially do secondaries on your home objective, or get off of the home objective to do secondaries, and to simply generate command points, which is really swing and miss on a 4-up, but can be useful. It's just compared to other factions, as you know of, other factions just generating command points more reliably. Grots, for example, I believe Zangors, then a couple other units. Shadow Sun, our other form of command point generation, has a chance to return a command point whenever you're in her aura if you use a stratagem, which I believe is on a 5-up, which is a decent enough ability. It's just not used very often. Shadow Sun isn't really taken too often in lists, but that can be useful if you have her sitting in the back with Sky Rays or Broadsides and you need a free command reroll, or not a free command reroll. You can use a command reroll or a stratagem from, for example, say you have Shadow Sun sitting next to a squad of Broadsides, and you use the stratagem from the experimental prototype cadre to boost the strength by one of the railguns, which is really useful. But Shadow Sun's ability will only give you back 1 command point on a 5-up, which is not reliable at all. Our only guaranteed command point, or -1 to the command point, is with Farsight, which it's, yay, we get a free command point, but it's basically useless now because we're losing so much firepower. You're trading out a minimum of 3 guns, because if you take a normal Crisis Suit Commander, Cold Star, or Enforcer, you're typically taking 4 guns or 3 guns and a War Gear ability like ignore modifiers to hit roll. So you're either taking Farsight for a free stratagem and some melee and +1 to wound within 9 inches, or you're taking 4 more guns. And in all of my experiences, running a commander with 4 more guns has been so much more valuable than running Farsight. It has been so much more important to so many lists. The most success I've had with Farsight, where it has felt the most viable and most useful on my lists, is whenever I just simply wanted to run him, and I ran him by himself, and he sat back mid to towards my home objective, behind all of my screening and chaff units in the front, and he would just do secondary and cleaned up after the enemies charged in to slightly help with the melee to kill a character. But otherwise, it's not the most useful in a command point sense. It doesn't generate you guaranteed command points, and you lose so many weapons in you lose so many weapons by taking him just for the one command point. Now, one of the biggest complaints that I've seen on Tau Facebook groups, Discords, other YouTube channels, comments of YouTubes, is our detachment rules. Being stuck behind, having to wait 3 turns to get your detachment roll is like unheard of, except for Tau. It's incredibly annoying. And I remember whenever 10th edition was first starting out, before Tau had their codex, I would be playing at school, like after school with friends, and we didn't have that much time, so we'd only do a couple rounds, and then we'd talk through the rest. Almost always, I wouldn't ever get to use my full detachment roll because I'd be waiting, so it would make me hate it. But besides that, and personal gripes from the past, the game is so killy. It's so killing dependent for the first half. You have to basically play non-existent, or you still have to play aggressive and lose so many troops to get that huge power boost by the end, but you've lost so many units, and that's where you have to make up for so much at the end. And that can be really taxing and like almost unenjoyable to play for a lot of people. And also, so many of our stratagems, which boost and make us good in the Kalyan, are stuck behind that turn 3 wall as well. You have to wait till turn 3, making it a lot harder and almost, for some people, not worth it to play and not fun. As well for Montka, only turns 1 through 3, losing it at the end, which is really annoying. I've also seen lots of complaints on our lack of keywords for a lot of our guns. We don't have any anti or anything like that. And I think anti would potentially help a lot if that was on weapons on weapons and models such as the Hammerhead. Specifically, the Hammerhead is a good example. Now, the Hammerhead's already strong with insanely high strength, really high AP, one shot, hitting on a 2 typically with heavy and guiding, or guided and +1 to hit because you're shooting a vehicle or monster, and then wounding on a 2 most of the time, unless it's an insanely tough enemy when you'd be wounding on a 3. But most of the things you're going to want to be shooting with your Hammerhead are going to have that 4-up invul, or that 5-up invulnerable save, which make it like, okay, my one shot, which is on a 2 into a 2, if you don't get super unlucky, because God forbid you're shooting your Hammerhead and you roll a 1, command reroll into a 1, then you use your ability into a 1 again, like, good lord. But anyways, then you get through the wound and you just shoot into this big enemy, and then they have a 4-up invul with your super high profile, super strong one-shot weapon. It does literally nothing. This turn, you shoot your Hammerhead, you hit the 4-up invul, it does nothing. And that's a big reason that people take Skyrays over the Hammerhead. They're not near as strong in how strong they are. They have quite a bit lower strength stat, but it's 3 more shots, which have a higher chance of going through versus against 1 4-up. You're more likely to fail at least 1 out of 3 4-ups rather than 1. Now, I guess that can be countered by rolling a 6 on a devastating wound, but even then, that's bad. It's still on a 6. I really wish the Hammerhead would be better in that sense, because the Hammerhead's such a cool and iconic model for the railguns, and I think having at least an anti-3-up would serve a really good purpose, or like anti-vehicle 3-up or anti-monster 3-up would make sense. I do think devastating wounds is a good thing to have on the Hammerhead, but so I would understand a point increase if it became anti-monster 3-up devastating wounds, or even if they got rid of the devastating and just kept anti-monster 3-up or anti-vehicle 3-up. I just think that'd be a good potential trade-off. Now, something that I think is the biggest where Tau struggle and cause a lot of problems and make the game slightly more annoying is the tax that we have to pay for guiding. We have to pay typically a minimum of at least 270 points, or I believe 13.5% of our army points out of a 2,000 point game to have the bare minimum for guiding. Almost every single list I see, and 99% of the lists that I build include 3 squads of stealth suits, 3 3-mans of stealth suits, and 1 squad of pathfinders, minimum, to account for all the guiding that we need to do. So first off, to make our units capable of shooting, we have to we have to sacrifice the good shooting. To make our units capable of shooting and do the normal shooting by the standard of the game, we have to sacrifice shooting from some of our units for the others. So then, to counter that, to make our shooting strong enough to where it actually feels like we're playing Tau that are only good at shooting, we have to take 3 units of stealth suits to give rerolls, hits, and wounds of 1. We have to sacrifice 270 points to be able to shoot normally, which is absolutely insane. That's 270 points. That's a whole other squad. That's multiple infantry squads. That's another big vehicle. That's such a game-changing amount of points that it's actually insane that we have to sacrifice that much to be capable. Another thing that we're missing in is the split fire penalty, which is rather annoying. I don't think it'll genuinely change that much at all if they get rid of that in a sense of win rate. There'll definitely be instances where it helps, but hitting on 3 against the unit and then 5 into the other is insane. Like, it doesn't even make sense from a lore perspective. Tau and reading, even when not guided by marker lights, are not hitting you on a 5. But anyways, if they would just make it so against a unit you're not guided against, you don't get the ballistic skill. So, say I'm shooting a Riptide, I'm guiding my Riptide into legionaries, and for some reason, so I'm shooting the ion gun into them, and I'm splitting off, and I'm shooting my missile pods and melt-a-gun into a squad of, I don't know, just any Marines to my left instead. Against those units, normally I'd be hitting on a 5. I'd be hitting on a 3 against the Legionaries and a 5 against the other Marines. If they would get rid of the minus, then I'd be hitting on 3s and then 4s, which honestly is a big difference, and would just be like a quality of life make sense change. So overall, some of the changes that I think that could happen for Tau are as follows. In the short run, so this edition, so in around June, whenever the rules come out, the big patch comes out for towards the end of the lifespan of the edition, this last year, whenever the new mission pack comes out, I think they could increase some of the toughness of our models, like I mentioned before, because they're either gonna see how low of a spot we are in the ranking, and they'll just give us a bunch of point cuts, which is not really a preference at all. That'll definitely help in a sense, but it won't be a fun change. It'll just be like, okay, now I have 1,000,000 crisis suits on the field. Not crisis suits are a big, scary, cool unit, or our Riptides are cool. Now, oh no, Riptides got cheaper. Now it's 3 auto-include. Now we're running Triptides again, just because they're so goddamn cheap. Not because a Riptide's a cool, strong unit, but because everything is cheap. They could increase the toughness and increase our points, make crisis suits T6, make a Riptide T10 and a Ghost Keel T9, increase the toughness of our big mechs, make them usable, make them tougher, make them cooler. They could increase the strength of some of our weapons. They could, like the Riptide Ion Blaster, the Ion Gun, only being 8 and 9 strength, but having such a high damage makes it fit into such a weird spot where it wants to shoot anti into a Terminator squad or into an Elite squad, but having such a high damage makes it want to shoot into vehicles because it has 4 damage, and it makes it just so swingy with how few shots it has shooting into vehicles because it doesn't have the toughness or doesn't have the strength to pop against light vehicles. We could have lower CP costs. The command points in Retaliation Cadre, we have that outside a 6-inch deep strike, but for 2 command points. We're the only army in the game, from my knowledge, that has to pay 2 command points for a deep strike that close rather than one command point. And we can't even charge after it. I believe there's some armies, I believe Necrons in one of theirs, can charge after deep striking that close. We could remove the split fire penalty. Just simply, you don't take a minus to what you're hitting on if you split fire. And in general, like the things I've gone over, improve our data sheets and increase the points. Make us more of an elite-based army. That's what Tau should be. It's what most people want. And when I say this, make it an elite-based army, I don't mean raise the points of crew detrimentally. If they want to give crew a buff, sure, you can raise the points. But don't make the swarm part of the army super expensive and not swarmy enough. Now, for the long run, and for that I mean potentially 11th edition and onward, they could just overhaul. I would believe most people would like an overhaul of the guiding mechanic, not make Tau so incredibly reliable on it. Simply make it more of a damage boosting mechanic. Make it so certain units are dedicated to guiding, like Pathfinders can guide, or anything can guide, but it doesn't increase the hitting. Make it so it does something different, or increase the strength of all of our other guns, but make guiding reliant on simply giving ignores cover and some other benefit. Or like from the kill team, for the Pathfinder's kill team, the more you've marker lighted something, the different buffs you get, or anything along those lines. I just believe most people would like a complete overhaul to the guiding mechanic in the future. Make the army more elite based in the further edition. That's something that can be done short term pretty easily, and also done long term, and that I think people would like to keep it that way. And overall, make the shooting army comparable to other shooting armies. There have been multiple times where my shooting phase has gone abysmal, and then I'm playing against another army, Necrons, just any other Eldar, any other shooting army, and a lot of the times they can do it better without even trying and with less units. And it's just, that doesn't feel right, and it's not how the game should be balanced. Anyways, thank you for listening, and this is where I believe Tau are in currently. Thank you for watching. Goodbye.